So welcome to Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta class. We're going to continue to read from the Madhya-līlā, chapter 20, text 247. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Nanda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Daivad, from time immemorial. Kshupita dharminyam, the material nature which is subjected to agitation. Svasyam, which belongs to the Supreme as one of his energies. Yona, in the womb from which the living entity takes birth. Parapuman, the Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead. Adhata, impregnated. Viryam, semina. Sa, that material nature. Asuta, produced. Mahatattvam, the total material energy. Hiranmayam, the original source for the emanation of varieties of material things. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Quote, from time immemorial, after agitating the material nature into three qualities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead places the semina of innumerable living entities within the womb of that material nature. Thus material nature gives birth to the total material energy known as the Hiranmaya Mahatattva, the original symbolic representation of the cosmic manifestation. Purport. This is a quotation from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3.26.19. Lord Kapila is explaining to his mother the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and material nature. He is informing her how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the original cause of the living entities who emanated from material nature. Over and above the 28 elements of the material creation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Life comes not from matter, but from life itself, as explained in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam, Katha Upanishad 2.2.13. The Supreme Lord is the original source of life. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapidam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svabharantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagishayasya Vadhane Lakshmiryasya Chavakshasi Yasya The Hridaye Samvit Tam Narasimham Maham Bhaje Pralada Hridayaladam Bhakta Vitya Vidaram Sharatindurajam Vande Pavindra Vandanam Harim. Translation again. From time immemorial, after agitating the material nature into three qualities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead places the semina of innumerable living entities within the womb of that material nature. Thus material nature gives birth to the total material energy known as the Hiranmaya Mahatattva, the original symbolic representation of the cosmic manifestation. So the chapter is entitled "The Lord Instructs Sanatana Goswami," and also the previous verse and the coming verse talk of that which is known as the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the pastime of creation. Here particularly the teachings of Lord Kapila Dev are being quoted, which are more of an analytic approach. Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya means it's an analytic study of the material nature, but also of the Supreme Lord and the living entities in regards to how they relate to each other in connection to the material creation. And you find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is of course often quoting the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And I would dedicate the first section of the class to the Bhagavatam introduction and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the perfect, actually how he represents perfectly the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. If you start reading the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as we have it, you will see that Srila Prabhupada in the beginning, in the introduction, dedicates quite a few pages to the biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, highlighting how he is actually the perfect preacher of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So his life and the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam are like one. He's considered like a Bhagavata, someone who embodies the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And I would like to quote to you or read to you a few lines. Here Prabhupada says in the introduction, "In the modern age, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by practical demonstration. It is easier to penetrate into the topics of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam through the medium of Sri Chaitanya's causeless mercy. Therefore, a short sketch of his life and precepts is inserted herein to help the reader understand the real merit of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It is imperative that one learn the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from the person Bhagavatam. The person Bhagavatam is one whose very life is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in practice. Since Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the absolute personality of Godhead, he is both Bhagavan and Bhagavatam, in person and in sound. And therefore his process of approaching the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is practical for all people of the world. It was his wish that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam be preached in every nook and corner of the world by those who happen to take their birth in India." So, and a bit further down, I just want to read one short pastime of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was very small. It is quoted here: "When the Lord was offered solid food at the age of 6 months in the Anna Prashana ceremony, the Lord indicated his future activities. At this time, it was customary to offer the child both coins and books in order to get some indication of the future tendencies of the child. The Lord was offered on one side coins and on the other the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The Lord accepted the Bhagavatam instead of the coins." So from very early childhood on, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indicated, of course, also his mission. And if the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifested his pastimes for 48 years, 24 of them where he had been Nimai Pandit, a very learned scholar in Sanskrit and Vedas, Vedanta. So, and he was very immersed, obviously from the very beginning, in this particular scripture, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The verse we find here that we talk about today is, as we already said, a quotation in regards to the Śrīmad-Līlā of the Lord, the pastime of creation, more an analytic statement. I would like to go into that a bit later. Let's stay a bit with the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam itself and how it starts. The first shloka is a very long shloka, and sometimes when you listen classes of Srila Prabhupada on that verse, he always supports or tells his disciples to try to chant the whole verse, although it's quite a very long one, not easy to chant. It's prose, and sometimes to find a tune or proper pronunciation is difficult. But he said it's important, you should learn to chant as good as possible. And of course we have the invocation Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Then Janmadi Asya Yatonyavat Itaratash Chatesh Abhikya Svarat. So this first line, I just want to read this one because there are three more. for my purpose, the first one is most significant. And the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam starts with, O my Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance and destructions of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. So the opening of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, of course, establishes Krishna as the son of Vasudeva, as the supreme truth, but also uses like his presence or his pastime of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as an explanation of his glories, or how we are to recognize or look at Sri Krishna. That he's not only the sweet boy in Vrindavan with his pastimes there, but that he at the same time is this absolute truth who is responsible that all that what we experience just right now, the world we are in, the cosmos, like the many universes, that they exist, that they're being maintained, and he is also the one who causes them to be destroyed again. So his eternal pastime, the Śrīmad-Līlā, is very prominent in the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and there is also in the second canto, and think in others, a listing of the main topics of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and I would like to read them to you. It's the primary creation, then second, the secondary creation, third, the planetary systems within the universe, fourth, protection through the Lord, fifth, the creative impulse, sixth, the rotation of the manus, seven, the signs of God, eight, return to the kingdom of God, and nine, liberation, 10, the summum bonum, the absolute truth. So we can see in that list there's a lot about Krishna's aspect as the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the material world. Because the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam intends to teach all the conditioned souls the proper understanding of how this material energy and us, how we relate to its cause, the Supreme Lord. Sometimes in the Upanishads, there's more talk of the absolute truth or the absolute, not necessarily Krishna or a person. Sometimes more the terminology is a bit more general or abstract. But Sri Vyasadeva, the compiler of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, of course highlights how Sri Krishna is to be understood as the supreme cause. And in the purport to this first verse of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Srila Prabhupada writes, "It is natural that a philosophical mind wants to know about the origin of the creation. At night he sees the stars in the sky and he naturally speculates about their inhabitants. Such inquiries are natural for man because man has a developed consciousness, which is higher than that of animals. The author of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam gives a direct answer to such inquiries. He says that the Lord Sri Krishna is the origin of all creations. He is not only the creator of the universe, but the destroyer as well. The manifested cosmic nature is created at a certain period by the will of the Lord. It is maintained for some time, and then it is annihilated by his will. Therefore, the supreme will is behind all cosmic activities." So the inquiry about topics like that is considered to be natural, and not only natural, actually there's necessity. Srila Prabhupada often used to critically remark that at his time, and now it didn't change much, that there's no official university or like not a department that teaches transcendental knowledge, the science of the self, the soul, of God. So, and he said that actually should be understood, because based on what we believe about the world and what it is, where it comes from, what its purpose is, from there on we form our ways of dealing with this world. essentially. So also for us, we hear this philosophy often, but also we could have a look at how we have that, or how does this affect how we walk through the world in everyday life? How do we perceive things? There could be still like a strong discrepancy, so to speak. We might see the world as something very separate, for example, and we don't connect it really to Krishna or as his energies, or ourselves. That's one of the, yesterday in the Kirtan festival also it was mentioned that the chanter is supposed to develop a sense of belonging to Krishna, like we all, in our process of bhakti yoga. Essentially, what is necessary in order to serve Krishna with love and devotion is that you feel I belong to Krishna. I'm, as we would say philosophically, I'm his part and parcel, the emanation of his eternal energy. But more personal, we are individual persons that are Krishna brought forth in order to enjoy with us his pastimes. And Srila Prabhupada also in some purpose of the Shisha Upanishad gives that example. He says like a father and mother come together and they create offspring in order to enjoy family life. Of course we could then also hear the Bhagavatam, what it says about family life, but essentially the idea of enjoyment that comes through this, there is some enjoyment, otherwise we wouldn't do it. He says Krishna similarly creates all or manifests all the living entities in order to enjoy with them like a father would enjoy, with his children and family. And that we are meant to be actually part or like take part consciously in his eternal pastimes. So the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam gradually teaches us to give up all misconceptions or like wrong identifications, because our problem is we don't identify necessarily or like not deeply enough with Krishna as a spiritual servant of him, as an eternal associate. We have this issue that like our mind is very much absorbed in the ahankara, the false ego, that again makes us believe that we have or are a material entity. And this separates us. It cannot, if the consciousness is there, it cannot be with Krishna, if it's really absorbed in the matter. So one big piece of work in spiritual life is to gradually transform our consciousness and Krishna says it in the Bhagavad Gita as it would be something very easy to Arjuna. Transcend the three modes of nature, rise above them. Like, do it, just rise above the three modes. And we know this takes quite a bit of effort. So we could also look a bit later in the practical aspects how Bhakti Yoga offers opportunities to attain detachment from the body and consciousness of the true self. One example might be mentioned just recently again was an Ekadashi day, and Ekadashi has different purposes, but one essential purpose is, Srila Prabhupada says, to decrease bodily demands, like learn some detachment, to voluntarily accept some inconvenience. So because like the more we experience ourselves in not needing the things we think we need, the more we can also move toward detachment. The more I'm convinced I need this and I need that, then there is like dependency. And often wants and needs are being mixed. Many things we think we need, we actually want. We could live without so many stuff, but we have developed the mentality, I need that or that much of it. So the idea is gradually to minimize whatever the body needs in all respects, and in this way lose some attachment and identification with the body. But at the same time, not just like with reducing the, so to say, sense gratification, but it's about at the same time absorb in the higher understanding that within this body, behind all those needs and things that we experience, there's a self that has different needs and wants to connect to Krishna in loving exchange. It might be through hearing, to chanting, to serving, exchange with devotees and so on. So that's essentially what we are meant to do or to be, that we ultimately at the end of this life, hopefully, that we are fit by the mercy of the Lord to enter into the spiritual realm, to Krishna. This verse here now that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just quotes to Sanatana Goswami is talking about the primary creation. I'll just shortly read the verse again. From time immemorial, after agitating the material nature into three qualities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead places the seminar of innumerable living entities within the womb of that material nature. Thus material nature gives birth to the total material energy known as the Hiranmaya Mahatattva, the original symbolic representation of the cosmic manifestation. So it speaks of the time immemorial, so far back no one can remember, and that would be the primary creation. In the secondary creation, when Brahma is present, he has an overview, but maybe also, I guess his memory is also limited, but no one can tell about what happened in the primary creation when nothing was manifested, like when no bodies were there. So it goes so far back, and it talks about how Krishna provides the ground for that what we call material world, when he stimulates his energies. And in the original verse that is quoted here, if we go to 3:26:19, the translation goes a bit different. He says, after the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his eternal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. So here the relationship between matter and spirit is already indicated in the purport. I wouldn't read all the purport because I would just continuously read you half of a book. The essential point is that the material nature itself is being tasked by the souls, actually, the jivas, to provide them with forms that they can enjoy. It's that the souls lose their consciousness in regards to their identity in relationship to Krishna, and become an order supplier, like they give orders to the material nature to give me this and give me that, and then identify with it. The material nature provides, and the ahankara principle is that what makes this illusion possible, that you can forget who you actually are as a spirit soul and become someone in the material world. And also in psychology there are like interesting explanations of how this kind of identification takes place. They are aware, also those psychologists. One is Paul Federn. He was also a student of Sigmund Freud, but then developed many other ideas which go way more deeper, and also actually resonate with what we hear from how the scriptures tell us how identification with matter happens, just in different terms, a bit more technical. And he says there's an energy of self, and then there's the kind of object energy, which is maybe essentially the same consciousness energy that Jiva has, and that we can direct this energy on matter. You can see that with things that you can identify with. That might be clothes that before were just some pieces of matter hanging there, and then you bought it and you felt, I like it, and your consciousness kind of connects with those things, and then they become mine. As the body becomes, like in a deeper sense, me. So the me and mine principle is like what ahankara does. It makes us identify things as belonging to us, or that being us, that are actually not. And it's simply about the absorption, the association, and by the force of desire, we just create artificially, practically, identities and belongings. Like I like to use the example of a chair. You come in this room, and there's this one particular chair, and some people very much appreciate particularly that spot and particularly that chair. And the mind might think that's my place, that's my chair, because I was sitting there week after week after week, and so to say the ride of habit. So I was there so many times, so therefore it's mine. You know, and we have the mind is kind of occupied, connects with a thing, lifeless thing, and considers that's mine. Although there's not really a basis for that. You know, I didn't bring forth that chair, or like there's no one who would sign me a paper, yeah, that's your chair. Why? But it's something that happens in the mind by connecting with it. So therefore the idea is to train the mind to always see everything within the creation as a manifestation of Krishna's energy. He has provided all the materials, you know, and he is the one who decides whether this remains like this or will be destroyed. The same as with the body. Because we don't bring forth any material elements or energy, we don't maintain it, it doesn't depend on us. And also we don't decide when it is being destroyed. Of course we can destroy some things to some degree, but this is also designated, you know, when we could do that, when we are allowed to do something. So in this way the Ishavasyam principle, who is the Supreme Lord and who is the real owner, is an essential part of our spiritual awakening. And the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam gradually teaches us with the Śrīmad-Līlā, starting in the 2nd canto, then going to the 3rd canto, and so on in many cantos. We hear overly, as here also Sanatana Goswami is instructed, about how Krishna is the real owner and controller of everything that exists. But not just in these terms, but like explained in a very analytic way, but sometimes more philosophically, like, you know, sometimes more in terms of pastime. But over and over again, the message is, please understand from whom everything that is there belongs, or like from whom it comes. Janmadi asya yataha. This is in the 1st Bhagavatam shloka. Everything that is there, that is manifested, comes from him, is maintained by him. So therefore recognize him as the source of everything that exists, including yourself. That's the message. And so this we can have in mind. If you sometimes ask, what does it practically mean for us? It means in our mind, let's keep this thought. Let's walk through the world and try to observe the things we see. And in our mind tell ourselves that this emanated from Krishna. He's responsible that it manifests, and he is the true owner. And I borrowed something from him, rightfully. I mean, of course, he says, you have a rightful claim. Ishavasimidam sarvam yat kincha jagdang jagat tena chaktina bhungchita makrita kashasvithanam. Every living entity has its designated quota of things that it can claim for maintenance. At the same time, one should not take more than that, the Upanishad says, knowing well to whom it belongs. Other translations go, you should not steal. Because that's also, Srila Prabhupada often points out, like this mentality of not recognizing the true owner is a mentality of a thief, who takes things, claiming them for himself, although he has no claim. So and then we get in trouble with material nature, because she is enforcing the law of karma, and that's how we create suffering. But often the tendency is we blame God for, or people blame God for the suffering then. Out of the misunderstanding that they actually in the first place have a misconception about who is the true owner. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, then also brings in the point, if you understand that he is the owner and you are actually yourself, like also differently from this body, you have given this body for a purpose, then the conclusion is, yes, therefore there is something you ought to do with it in a particular way. We say, dedicate your life in this human form to the service of Krishna. As an animal, you can't do it unless some humans involve you, in the service of Krishna. Or you come to happen like being some cat or dog near a temple and you eat prasadam and stuff like that. But hardly out of your own capacity. So the pastime itself it's a very actually interesting, every pastime is interesting. What I want to say is the fascinating thing of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is that there the essential item or mood seems to be sleeping. Krishna's rasa in the Yoga Nidra. So it also resonates with what the living entities do. It is said that living entities are being put to sleep while we are, because the verse talks about how Vishnu impregnates the material nature. And we know from the Brahma Samhita he does this through his glance. It's also amazing, just by his glance, the power of his sight, he transfers the living entities into the material nature, and from there, that's the living force, the material nature becomes active, develops forms, and at the same time, although we are the active principle, still we are inactive. We are sleeping, it is said. We dream the dream of material nature. And the word Maya means also literally that what is not. So there's something appearing in front of our mind, eyes, consciousness, and we accept it as reality, as sat, but although it is asat, it has not really substance. It comes and changes constantly, and therefore it has no true reality. And also Vishnu himself, what he is doing, he manifests first of all like an ocean. The first ocean, the Viraj, it's sometimes called a river, which is just considered the borderline between spiritual and material worlds, where Mahavishnu is residing, the Karana ocean, the ocean of causes, and therefore also Karana, the Kashya Vishnu. And he lays down there also on Ananta Shesh, like his big snake bedstead, and rests in Yoga Nidra, which is translated by Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur as mystic trance. Some of you may have done meditations, deeper meditations, perhaps hypnosis. That's something, it's a state of mind where you can enter. It's not that you sleep. You are there, but on a different level of consciousness, more of a subconscious. Trance is called, you kind of float within your mind, kind of, and you can even let go of this body. Also you can hypnotize people or yourself also, and you can really experience that you literally forget your body in a sense. You don't feel it. People then describe, I forgot, I didn't feel arms and legs and body anymore, just kind of myself in there. So it is possible also in a kind of awakening state already to disconnect in a good way from the body. You can also disconnect in bad ways from the body. We don't recommend those. So this is a practice one can do. Similarly, as can see, if you're absorbed in something, you might be enthusiastically talking in the kitchen about Krishna and some philosophy, and you have your hand on the stove. And you might not notice that your hand is burning unless you smell something, then you look at it, and then your mind becomes aware, and just then you sense the pain. This is consciousness, if it's directed and with something, then it perceives it. If it's disconnected, withdrawn, nothing. So if one is completely also withdrawn from the body, so to speak, you don't feel things. Let's say with the example of hypnosis, they also use it if there are victims of fire burns, strong burns. They might be put into hypnosis, and they explain it, the center in the brain that is responsible for pain is being kind of switched off. But essentially the thing is, you don't feel it, because your mind disconnects from the body. And then it can heal also efficiently, and so they do also other things with hypnosis. So that's an example that maybe goes close to what we also consider in meditative trance. When we hear of yogis and so on, how they're absorbed in transcendental sound vibration, floating in this transcendental sound is also something that allows you at the end to withdraw your consciousness from bodily demands and needs, and just being absorbed in the self. So that's our aim. We could say we are busy with trying to wake up because we are put to sleep in this material world. And they said the 3 stages of consciousness, wakefulness, dream, and dreamless sleep, they all belong to this dream state actually, even the awakening, because it is connected to that we have a false perception of this world. True awakening would mean that one comes to the understanding of Atma and loses identification with matter. So Vishnu himself, he has this yoga nidra, trance. He's never sleeping really. He's in the state of also enjoying his energies internally. He's blissful. Also Lakshmi Devi is with him when he becomes Garbhodakasya Vishnu. We see that picture, how she's massaging his feet, chanting his glories, and he's there kind of in this mystic trance, slumber. And it's also not that he's inactive, as when we sleep, we are just out. There's nothing we do practically, except our body functioning, but Mahavishnu simply by breathing manifests universes out of his skin pores, which is an amazing pastime if you think of that. When his breath is like, even also as here, time immemorial, that cannot be grasped by a mind, the time frame of how long such a breath of Mahavishnu takes. And then as Garbhodakasya Vishnu, like a lotus flower just manifests from his navel, on which he makes Brahma appear, who then manifests the planets in the universe. And also he is then the person responsible to, from the subtle state to the gross state, manifest all the living entities. Because in this verse that we read, it is said how the living entities themselves kind of cause the material nature to manifest forms. And first it happens in a very subtle way. We understand from the descriptions it goes from transcendental, there's Brahman, the energy, and then it transforms into Mahatattva by Mahavishnu's influence. It's a very subtle form. Sometimes there's the Pradhan as the next state. Sometimes the explanations go a bit different and the terminology can be confusing. One is like Mahatattva, then Pradhan, the unmanifest matter, and then Prakriti when it becomes truly manifest. And manifest means that it is visible to the senses of a conditioned living entity. Pradhan is then more like also on the subtle, more in a subtle realm. But Brahma is a very powerful being who has access to way more subtle realities, and he sees within the body of Garbhodakasya Vishnu, he is able to see the planets in their subtle state. And also we as living entities, it is interesting, we said we rest in his abdomen, in his belly. So there we go to sleep when Brahma sleeps also, or when Brahma sleeps, because when he's done, then everything is done, and we go back into Mahavishnu and sleep there since time immemorial, and for times that we cannot even measure. So he sees then in Vishnu's body the planets, and he's being empowered to manifest them and places them according to the destination around the lotus stem that is coming from Garbhodakasya Vishnu's navel. And then also he populates, or like not all he does exactly himself, but he manifests Prajapatis and so on, living entities who are supposed to manifest progeny. And we know the stories, like from the third canto, how it starts, like in our universe and in this calculation. And it didn't start well. The Kumaras declined. No, thank you. We are not interested in this job. we want to stay brahmacharis and just be absorbed in transcendence. And then Rudra or Shiva was very inclined to do it, but his offspring had the contrary effect. They rather, because of his angry nature, destroyed everything. Even Brahma they wanted to devour. So till ultimately those Prajapatis were manifested, worked according to plan, and then. So yes, this is how it goes. Then all this world is gradually manifested, and the living entities are given their designations. And life after life, we can play different roles until we awaken to the true consciousness of being a spirit self. And what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here instructs, this analytical study, for example, or other parts, are very much in the foreground in the process of this awakening, as we said already, and also the Bhagavad Gita in the first verse of the Chatusloki actually also addresses Krishna in that regard, as we also hear from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, this Janmadi Astya Yataha, Ahang Savasya Prabhavo Matar Sarvang Pravartate Iti Madhva Bhajantivang Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha. Those who understand Krishna as the cause of everything, he says everything emanates from me, and the wise who truly understand that, they worship me with love and devotion. Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha. Those who are intelligent. Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur gives a different explanation. If I remember correctly, he says that Krishna talks to Arjuna, because you have bhava or love for me, therefore you understand this. But also the other way around, true transcendental knowledge leads to the development of love for Krishna. Because if you can truly see him, or like have this vision or this worldview, see him as such, then we can also naturally develop an emotional connection, an affection, an appreciation. Like we start with respect, it's a very positive, powerful emotion that can become more and more an affectionate, loving, sentiment. And it's not, because sometimes the impression might be, oh yeah, those types of texts like the Sankhya philosophy, that's a bit dry and that's for those who are like very much intellectual. And to some degree, yes, it's a bit quite an effort for the intelligence, whereas other maybe portions of the Bhagavatam can be relished easier. At the same time, it is clearly connected. It has nectar. Srila Prabhupada also says in the lectures to the first Bhagavatam shloka, he says every shloka you should relish each Bhagavatam verse, because everything is a transcendental sound. So yes, here these are some thoughts on the verse that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is now speaking to Sanatana Goswami. So I would open up for comments and questions, if there are some.
I have something, it's not totally related, but in the 9th canto, since you're into the Srishti-Līlā and everything, there's this verse in chapter 3:29 where the marriage of Sukanya and Chiyavana Muni is described, and then it says that taking his own daughter Revati Kakutmi, he went to Lord Brahma in Brahmaloka, which is transcendental to the 3 modes of material nature, and inquired about a husband for her. And then Prabhupada writes, it appears that Brahmaloka, the abode of Lord Brahma, is also transcendental above the 3 modes of material nature. So how can we understand that? You were also saying how Brahma, he's actually perceiving Vishnu and all, so it seems a little bit confusing.
Yes. There are different places I can... give me just a second. Yes, Brahma is depending also whether he is a jiva or like maybe a guna avatar in the sense of a partial expansion of Vishnu. He's of course on a very powerful level. And also the spheres, because Brahmaloka or Satyaloka is already maybe it's considered like pure goodness to some degree. So it's not like there's a clean cut, like from there, there's also transition period from material to spiritual. And it said also Brahma, for example, is not under the influence of time. And I can read you the quote if I just find it right here. In Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3:15:3, the demigods address Brahma as Vibhu, which means unlimitedly big in comparison to Anu, which is related to this is bigger than time, so to speak. He's above the influence of time. He's also considered Tri-Kala Gyan, knowing past, present, and future. and how he has somewhat a position above the three modes. At the same time, sometimes he, in his pastimes, he seems to be influenced by the modes like passion, I guess one must consult maybe different scriptures or like Vaishnavas who have more deeper insight to know when they talk of what type of Brahma in a pastime, if it's a Jiva Brahma who might have some conditions, or if it's like Vishnu as Brahma. But yeah, he's a very powerful being, and I said that there are places like this, for example, in the third canto, where it's clearly said, for example, he's above the influence of time, or sometimes, that is transcendental, where he resides. 3:15:3. Doran?
Just have something small to share about what you said. The body, you can like get on this state of you don't feel the pain and everything. And I saw an experiment which even goes that far that you can feel the pain of something, like you attach yourself to an object which is not your body, but it was like this. The person was there, and they put the plastic, and actually first they covered his sides, so you didn't see his arm, and they made some breathing, some kind of something, and they were poking needles in his hand, like he couldn't feel them, he didn't feel anything. And then they took a plastic arm and took away the covering, the same thing, and then they started to put needles in this plastic arm, and you felt the pain. So you can even attach to something and feel the pain which is not even yours.
Yeah. Essentially, that's what the scriptures say, what happens right now, but we don't have this body outside of our body, we are in this body, but yeah. Or like people have the so-called phantom pains. The limb is gone, but the subtle body still has the idea it's there and feels pain, although the organic matter isn't around, the nerve cells aren't there. But it's like kind of, it's stored.
Thank you very much. I had a little bit of a complicated thought, because this morning I was listening to a lecture of Prabhupada where he also uses this Vibhu and Anu, and Prabhupada was describing why the Supreme Personality of Godhead actually takes birth. And also while you were mentioning in the lecture, you mentioned how why the Lord incarnates. And it was, Prabhupada said that the Lord incarnates to glorify his devotees. For example, if the Lord becomes the son or of some person, it's a big thing, so to glorify his devotees. And there was just something I was thinking about. There is this whole conception of the Nitya Baddhas and the Nitya Siddhas. And perhaps, although these are Jiva Tattvas, these entities who become the parents or close associates are Nitya Siddhas. And at the same time, Prabhupada says that through the practice of Krishna consciousness, when you do reach the planet, you have to be like Krishna to be able to reach the planet of Krishna. And then I'm thinking, so that means that, because there is always this question, that the transition from Nitya Baddhas to Nitya Siddhas, a very complicated and controversial one. But I was really thinking that, is there a hope that living entities at some point, through purification, do make that transition? I'm not very clear on that.
So are you asking if Nitya Baddha means that there's no way out really of the material world? So my understanding is that Srila Prabhupada uses or explains, like as here this word is used, time immemorial, or also before memory, that there's not really a beginning. He says there's no beginning in time where one could trace back the conditioning of the jiva. And since it is such immense time periods, it's considered eternal. So, but not that there's no beginning and no end. So that the living entity is in a pure state eternal, but its material existence is temporary. But it can be, as even in this temporary frame, so immensely long, it's considered eternal, since you have it, I don't know how many billions of lifetimes. But yes, exactly, that's because you mentioned the avatars of Krishna when he comes. Do you notice what is called in English eine Rückrufaktion? Someone here. Yeah. He calls us back. He always comes like, this kind or in a wake up call. He comes say, wake up, Jeev Jago, wake up to your true identity. You're not at home here, although you think that. So you belong to the spiritual world, and there is certainly hope. I mean, there must be hope that we can go back, because the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is trying to inspire the desire within us, by telling us about the spiritual realm, and also encourages us to take up the path. And as Srila Prabhupada has it in so many, his whole magazine, Go Back to Godhead. He says that's the perfection of life. Also mentioning in Brahma's case, in the second canto, there's the story when Brahma enters Vaikuntha and sees Lord Narayan, and they see face to face, shake hands. And then in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada says, that's the perfection of life, seeing Krishna face to face. Yeah.
I wanted to add that we are eternally conditioned, but when we surrender to Krishna, there's always this statement that immediately we become free from all sins, and immediately we will develop love of Godhead. And then we think, I practicing so long Krishna consciousness, nothing has happened. But from the view of eternity, it's like this, maybe few lifetimes or now, and so it's only soon we will be back.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing.
Just something, because you were mentioning before how I just read this morning. So this is from a book from Shivam Swami, Chant, and it's about story. Recently I received a letter from a devotee in Mayapur, and they were telling me about Mata Sachi Devidasi. She was from South America, and she was dying from multiple sclerosis. She left her body around Gaur Purnima time, and over many months she had sons and her husband was there, and gradually she was giving up her attachments. One evening, as she lay there, her body was trembling, and her husband asked what was wrong. She said, Krishna came to me and asked me to dance with him, and I couldn't go. Then sometime later, a similar thing happened, and again the husband asked, what is now? Is it Krishna again? And she said, no. This time it was Srimati Radharani, and she said, you can refuse Krishna, but you can't refuse me. Then she left her body on Rasa Purnima, the night of Rasa dance. She left her body in Mayapur Dham, so she went back to Godhead. So on this point of, giving up the attachment, and I forgot what you were saying, but eventually, it's about the mercy also, and it's about, I lost the point that you were making there. But it's just a powerful example of how eventually, this can be transcended in just like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta ki jai. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.